Hello, Dr. Shefali.
Hi, I'm so happy to be with you.
I'm thrilled to be with you as well. I'd actually first come across your work on a couple of the podcasts that I listened to, Impact Theory with Tom Bilyeu and Lewis Howes, School of Greatness. And then I got to see you live a couple times last year at your own event and at Summit of Greatness, which is Lewis Howes' annual event. And I was just blown away. And I'll tell you why. I feel like the relationship space, relationship advice space is so saturated. And a lot of the advice out there is rooted in power dynamics and having the upper hand and saving face versus understanding ourselves and growth and evolution. And so when I heard you speak at Summit of Greatness, I was grateful for the new perspective that you were bringing to this space. And that was when I ended up attending your live event and was blown away. And I was thrilled to learn about a month ago that you're launching a brand new course called Free to Be, and it's all about relationships. And so I wanted to use this opportunity to for you to share your perspective on relationships, and then also talk a little bit about the course. And I think that's it for today.
Yeah, well, thank you. The reason I was so inspired to create a really unique course, Free to Be, finding the me in the us, is because, in my work as a therapist, I see plethoras of couples who are stagnating in power dynamics, in saying to the other, you have to meet my needs, or feeling betrayed or cheated upon or isolated because those needs are not being met. And my approach is quite fundamentally paradigm shifting in that it doesn't really look to the outer for the needs to be met. And all the inner work that we need to do needs in itself to be the one who fulfills those needs. The inner work will fulfill the needs. So I teach people how to soothe and mother and reparent themselves in such a unique way that their entire paradigm shifts. So they're no longer externally focused, hungry, betrayed, cheated, lonely, but they begin to see how the relationship is a beautiful mirror, a replica, an echo of the inner territory. And it's quite flamboyantly shocking at first to realize how we attract just the right people in our lives to ignite self-work. But because we don't know that that's why we're attracting the people, we end up feeling betrayed and cheated upon and resentful and regretful because we don't use the relationship in the way it's supposed to be used.
Right. So would you say that most people use the relationship for like pleasure, for boosting their ego, for trying to conform to society?
Most people unconsciously stumble upon relationships like just tripping on a pebble. and some chemicals flow and affinity arises and some familiarity, meet them 5-6 times, and now you have the delusion that you're in love. Romantic love has really been blasphemized and contorted the whole idea of high love. And it's kind of messed us up. Because it's often very chemically driven. And many times that's how it is for men, at least.
Right.
And it's very unconsciously pulled upon by both parties. And I call those relationships typically karmic relationships, where karma is a Hindu word meaning action, which implies that those relationships are full of action behaviors, cause and effect behaviors that are habituated from childhood. And what feels like love is just actually a recreation of old patterns. And unless we then use the relationship to understand the pattern, we will use the relationship for what you said, for simply filling old needs and not even know that we're filling the need. But here's the thing, because we're unconscious, we will attract the other based on our level of consciousness. And the other one is attracting us based on their level of consciousness. And so we have this, I call it the twin beggar syndrome, where both are with hands outstretched, looking for the other to fill the ego, fill the need, fill the missing pieces. And guess what? they clash against each other, and both end up feeling empty because they entered empty, hoping for resolution on the outside. So this dynamic is the predominant paradigm. And people just keep recreating the dynamic without realizing that the relationship is a clarion call to wake up. Wake up to what? To how you've just recreated a pattern. And when you understand relationship dynamics, which I'll be explaining in my course, then you begin to have so many aha moments. It's kind of, like I said, flamboyantly shocking, brutal at times, to realize you've been attracting person after person, colleagues, bosses, friends, lovers, based on some very old templates from childhood.
Yeah. So I have two questions about that. The first is, why do you think so many people bypass the lessons, meaning date, and then maybe they move right into another relationship to numb the pain, or turn to substances or social media distraction or whatever it might be? Why do you think so many people shy away from the growth and the personal learning and exploration and try to stay on that surface level of looking a certain way or appearing a certain way or having, power or whatever it might be?
Well, you know very well that most of us are asleep, and we're zombies really to the higher truth of our existence. Mm-hmm. And very few of us have awakened to the fact that there's a greater purpose, a greater meaning to all our patterns, to all our relationships. So the reason why people stay superficial is because they haven't yet woken up. That's all. Mm-hmm. And the awakening process occurs when one is ready. And often, sadly, enough pain creates the awakening. You see, in childhood, our needs were not fundamentally met because most of us were raised by unconscious parents. Mm-hmm. So from childhood, we had to split off from our authentic self, and we created layers of a false self: the perfectionist, the overachiever, the overdoer, the lazy one, the withdrawn one, the narcissistic one, the codependent one, the pleaser, the martyr, the victim. It doesn't matter what roles we created, but all these became these false masks, personas we began wearing. So now when we go out in the world, we are all with these masks. So of course we only stay on the surface because, so say this is the authentic self, but these are all the masks. We only show this one to the outside world, and only the tip of who we are gets touched. And then say somebody removes the first mask and looks within. It's a very scary process for us. So we bolt. Mm-hmm. We're threatened because our layer, our shield that has kept us so comfortable gets pricked. And so we run to the next relationship, to the alcohol, to the food. And we then want to recreate the shield. So we quickly create some sabotaging pattern, betrayal, hurt, resentment, and we just create the shield again. The same things that happened in the first primal place when we got hurt and upset, we created a shield. Same thing happens here. And we blame the other and keep creating shields. Instead of saying to ourselves, is this happening because I have hurt and resentment and regret and guilt and shame already? Right? But that's too vulnerable making for people. So we stay at the surface because it's very threatening for people to go to their inner, deepest, authentic self that's been so marauded since childhood that they're split off from it,
Yeah. I love that you brought that up because, again, going back to the current relationship advice ecosystem, which is so rooted in power and control. I had an experience about a year ago where I was dating a guy for a couple months and it was the most fun, and he ended up ghosting, which is, disappearing without word. And, when I was trying to process this experience and turning to the existing advice out there was so much of 5 ways to win him back, or, what you did wrong and why he disappeared and all of this stuff, versus what you just shared, which is, and now is so clear to me, his childhood experiences that caused him to react, and then my own role in co-creating the dynamic. So I know co-creation is a passion of yours. Yes. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what you mean by it and how it plays out in relationships.
Yeah, the most profound truth is this, that the reason we stay stuck in our lives, repeating patterns and victimized by them and feeling eternally wounded by the outside world is because we are not brave enough to own our part in the co-creation of the dynamics. And we are so oblivious, so cut off from our part. And in our desire to look good and to win back and to be in power, we actually disempower ourselves the most, because it is only by looking in the mirror and owning, oh, this is how I set things up always, that we can take our power back. Mm-hmm. But that means we have to be vulnerable. That means we have to say, you know what? I had a part too. Oh my goodness, I was completely part of this infidelity. Mm-hmm. I now see. I didn't want to have my eyes open, but now I do. So owning that makes us feel like we're letting the other person off the hook. Mm. And it's like this power game that we keep playing, that I can't let the other one off the hook. But in doing these power dynamics, we keep ourselves stuck, and we keep ourselves victimized by us being a victim, instead of freeing ourselves by realizing how we co-created our victimhood.
Yeah. And I can say personally, once I started to do the work of realizing the subtle ways in which I co-created this dynamic, it was the most empowering thing. Like, there was nothing disempowering about it, taking responsibility. I feel like the victimhood is a much more disempowering place because it's completely out of your control.
Yes. So there's two ways we set it up. One is in the preemption, maybe three ways: in the pre-setup, in the actual dynamic, and then in the post hoc, right? Mm-hmm. So in all ways, we have ownership. So maybe we were completely blind till the abuse, or till the ghosting, or till the whatever X thing that happened to us. But then we have power in how we react, right? So at any juncture, we can begin to take ownership. But that means releasing blame, releasing responsibility to the other person, not even waiting to forgive the other person, because there's really, and people won't like this when I say this, there's really nothing to forgive, because that person has actually done you a favor by showing you something about yourself and shown you how you needed to be set free. Mm-hmm. So what a great gift this is. But you see, because the old paradigm is all about martyrdom and victimhood and blame and externalization, we keep ourselves stuck and in suffering. And there is a way to end suffering, and that's what this course is going to cover. But people are going to shy away from it because it means maximal responsibility over your life.
Yeah, I love that. So I want you to talk about, you've shared a little bit about this idea of the delusion of marriage, and how we bring all of these expectations and put so much on our partners in marriage. Share a little bit about your perspective and what someone who was more evolved might bring to a partnership.
Well, first, let's understand that when we get married legally, we are buying into an institution. And this institution has been so ingrained in our cultural psyches that we are not even aware that we have a choice. And we're not aware that this institution is man-made. Mm-hmm. But because religion has become involved with it, we think the marriage is divinely ordained. But really, in truth, marriage was created as a way to manage property, mm-hmm. including women and children. Mm-hmm. And it was really for ease of passing it down the lineage. And it really didn't have anything more to it than that. Yeah. But now comes religion, and then comes divine ordination, and then comes romanticism. Mm-hmm. So now we've put onto something that was really a very factual transactional agreement, we've put a lot of other stuff onto it. But its basis, we must be clear, is rooted in ownership and property and control and possessiveness. You have to, and now we've put this other stuff in a relationship which is based on that. You will eventually see the face when, say, the partner cheats on you, or when the partner wants another partner, or when the partner wants to move on. And it stops being about what it should be about, which is spiritual growth and evolution. And it goes back to the roots of what it was based on, which is property control, possession, ownership, and, management of an asset. And, women, who wear rings, for example, and again, I'm just talking about deconstructing institutions.
Right.
A ring is an ornamentation of possession.
Yeah.
It's to say, look, I'm taken, and we put so much stock in it. If you only realize what it really means,
Right.
We create our own enslavement by tying to these institutions. So then what happens is when the relationship now doesn't grow or stifles or takes a turn or just, people are ready to move on, the institution is inbuilt with guilt and fear, right? And so then the marriage becomes a non-dynamic static entity, which doesn't allow for evolution. And a marriage that ends because of a true, authentic blossoming in a different direction of two people now is called a failure. And if you really think about it, to promise longevity, to promise loyalty to the other for the length of time in a very specified formulaic way,
right,
it's kind of very rigid and myopic. Now, if both partners entered it understanding it's for the moment, it's for evolution, it's for the sincerest commitment to the other's growth, then there would not be the industry of divorce. It wouldn't be such a moneymaker. Lawyers would be out of business. Right. And people would naturally keep the commitment to each other in the most beautiful way. The children would not suffer. You see, so people say, oh, when marriages break, children suffer. Marriages break and children suffer not because the relationship needs to have created it, but because of the egos involved. If the relationship was truly for the other's growth, the marriage ending has nothing to do with the children suffering. The children suffer because of the basis of marriage, which is possession, control, and ownership. And when the relationship ends, the person gets upset because my control, my possession, how can you leave me? All that comes to play. And that's why the children suffer.
I love that. That resonates a lot. I've never been someone who has these big dreams about marriage. I'm not interested in having kids myself either. And so all of what you said really resonates. I'm curious if you were to put together a dating profile for a conscious relationship, how might that begin?
Well, first it begins with an honest appraisal of the self. And does the individual self understand who it is they are consciously? And have they spent time working on their own stuff from their own past and understand their own growth and their position on their own growth evolution? And then when you have such a person, you have to understand that person is already not going to be finding anyone or looking for anyone, because they understand that these things are highly energetic and highly perfect the way they are. Whether they're there or not, it's perfect. Because the individual is so hell-bent on evolving themselves and becoming full onto themselves, a lover onto themselves, a marriage into themselves, a partner onto themselves. So this is not about me. No, it's about so much self-worth and self-love that they are full and abundant, never feeling craving, missing, or lack. So then when that person happens to meet a vibrationally aligned human being, first they understand that this doesn't have to be forever. Right? They understand that it's for this moment of growth and resonance. And they are both here to help each other evolve, either for a day, for a season, for 10 seasons, right? Is there growth potential? Can I be my lightest, most buoyant, most liberated self, authentic self with this person? Because typically most people are inauthentic with each other. They're compromising, they're sacrificing. These are the things we were taught by our parents. Don't be the real you, sacrifice the real you. Right. And while compromise has a noble part, it cannot be to the sacrifice of the self.
I love that. That's interesting. I recently had a dating experience that was incredibly healing. Met a man, had amazing personality chemistry and really poor physical chemistry. And I tried to write it out and see if the physical would develop. It didn't. And I communicated very honestly to him how much I loved spending time with him, but also how I really wasn't feeling the physical. And I think that based on his past experiences with parents that, were unfaithful, and I know that you don't necessarily subscribe to that word and want to dig into that more, but longstanding infidelities and other challenges in his upbringing. I think my being really honest was incredibly healing for him, and him not running away after I shared that, and us still being able to have a friendship, which, to this day, he's one of my closest friends.
That's great.
Has been beautiful and incredibly healing. So, but going back to what I just said, I know that you believe that no one can betray you, and that the real betrayal is the betrayal of the self. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So I just want to go back to touch upon a point that you made. Why it was healing is because he didn't get defensive. He didn't get his ego taken in, I'm imagining. And he understood that sometimes you're not a match. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. And I truly believe that we find our vibrational matches in the unconscious spectrum and in the conscious spectrum. And the more we evolve, the more we find more conscious matches. But everyone is a match for exactly who it is we are in that moment. Right. And then we move on and either stay with them or work it out or evolve.
Yeah.
So yeah, I believe no one can betray us because there is no real betrayal at the end of the day, only lessons for growth. And what feels like a betrayal, somebody stole my pen, somebody took my husband, somebody took my shoe. These are all things external that ultimately show us who we are internally. So then how can it be a betrayal? Because life is about loss. So sometimes we lose the shoe, sometimes we lose the person. And it's okay. One is in form. The shoe, the pen, the house are all form-based things which show us, the reason I'm in grieving and so much despair is because I was attached to that form. And true life and living is to learn to have things but not be attached to them. Now, when you come to a person has a formless relationship with you in essence, an ephemeral energy. And now if you lose them, say they cheat or betrayed you or lied to you, okay, they are allowed to do what they have to do. It's a lesson for us to understand who it is we attract, why we attract them, and then to evolve, to move on. But to understand that that person has freedom to do whatever they need to do at the level of consciousness that they're at. Yeah. They're not here to betray you. They're just betraying themselves, perhaps, because they can't be true.
Right.
No one wants to really lie. Just like children, they don't want to lie. It's the conditions are not available for truth. And that seems like a cop-out, but that's the truth. So if you're in a relationship where there's a lot of lying, either you or the other, it doesn't matter. Because if they're lying to you, means you're lying to you too. Because why aren't you awake to the fact that they're lying, right? I mean, it's out of alignment. So everyone's kind of asleep. You can't blame the other one. You're equally asleep, right? So it's not about blame anyway. It's about waking up and going, okay, what is this here to teach me? Mm-hmm. Oh, it's here to teach me that I'm really possessive about that person. I believe they shouldn't cheat. I believe they shouldn't lie. Well, why are you so attached to that idea? Why are you so attached to your ownership of the other person? How can you release them? And if you truly loved them, which I believe very few of us really do, we would have compassion for them. We would release them, have boundaries, but release them with joy and compassion. Because everyone is doing the best they can at their level of consciousness. You don't have to take it, though. You can have a boundary. See, we don't want to create a boundary. We don't want to leave them. We don't want to leave, change. So we're upset with them for being less than perfect. Right. But if they're less than perfect and you're not happy, you can accept it. You can change yourself for them, but you can also leave.
Right.
Stop. But see, we don't want to leave because it messes up our whole life. So we just stay upset with the other person and want them to change.
Yeah. I love the quote, people can only meet you as deeply as they've met themselves.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm curious why you think so many people, I imagine it's much more common for someone to cheat, whether it's in a relationship or a marriage, versus just have a conversation with someone. Why do you think it's so much more common to go the route of, quote unquote, deception or not being honest and expressing your feelings with the other person?
Because marriage as an institution is based on ownership and control. So you are owned by the other person. So now you go try talking to your less than evolved spouse that, I just met somebody who I have this energy with and I'd like to explore it. I want to go to Mexico for a weekend. You can't. You see, this marriage has created this delusion that you are to not create any intimate connections with anyone unless that partner approves of that person.
Yeah.
And we women are pretty possessive too, you know? And men, because their sexual needs are voraciously higher, 10, 15 times higher, just based on their biology, men are, and I'm not condoning them, it just is a fact. They will always find a way to cheat before having an emotionally courageous conversation. Men don't even mostly know how to connect to their emotions, then to express them, articulate, explain, take their own stand. I mean, they're victims of their own makeup too.
Right.
And so they're like, why bother the system? Let's just cheat and lie and do what we did when we were children.
So let's say there's someone who's looking to evolve personally and in their relationships. What are a couple things they can look to get out of your course?
Oh my goodness. Well, first in my course, I have a real life couple, you know, doing counseling with me, and we are going to go all out. And I'm going to have many people coming in to talk about relationships and their own experiences. So not only will they see a wide spectrum of real life people, but from my course, you know, I'm a breaker of paradigms. I will tell women, you know, how they create their own victimhood. I will talk to men about why and how they cheat and why porn is the most visited sites on the internet, you know, and bring it out and talk about sex and talk about sexuality and talk about how not having physical intimacy in an authentic way does create some dynamic struggles, and bring about the conversations around inner children and our struggles and how we're really using each other parasitically. So I think it'll cause people to stop, to really re-examine themselves. It'll be uncomfortable, but it will also be liberating because it'll help people to break out of the enslavement of their own patterns.
I love that. And I've obviously gone to your live events, but I've done a couple of your other online courses and I eat them up. I love them so much. You and Esther Perel both share such a way with words. And it makes me a little jealous because you both you're foreign born. So English isn't your first language, and your grasp of language is so poetic and your vocabulary is so vast. And I really appreciate it. I appreciate the way that you express things a lot. So your course starts March 6th. People can sign up now. It's called Free to Be. I signed up as soon as I saw the announcement. I cannot wait.
And it's all online. So we have a global audience, and only typically 50% attend live anyway. And we have a thriving Facebook page where there are enormously buzzing conversations happening every day. And everything is archived and recorded beautifully on a platform for each student, customized for them. They can go through it at their own pace. So it's going to be a fabulous 5 months of delving deep into the nature of the self, and the nature of the relationship, and most importantly, the nature of liberation and freedom.
I love it. And there's an app as well. So I know, like for myself personally, I do a lot of the learning on the app on my phone. You can take it to go while you're out running errands. It's perfect.
Yes.
So thank you so much for sharing your perspectives today. As I mentioned before, I feel like there's so much advice out there that it's rooted in its power and its game playing, and this feels so authentic and true to me, and exciting too. I think a lot of people might look at this idea of, you know, self-work as work, and I see it as this juicy opportunity to connect with myself. So thank you again.
Thank you so much. And I do want to offer your audience a $95 coupon, and they can go to the link that's here and just press the coupon, enter the coupon, and join my course for much cheaper. And it's going to be really a content dense course, experience rich and insight heavy. So I really hope to see you all there. Thank you for having me again, Leah.
Thanks again.